My God, so exciting. You are rebranding your company.
Yay!
Celebration. So often
Yes.
sometimes rebranding is done just on its own. Sometimes it's done in conjunction with creating new assets, maybe a website, et cetera, et cetera. So today, my colleague Laura and I are going to talk about if you're going through rebranding, what are the deliverables that you want to make sure that you have in your hot little hands once you finish this process with the designer that you're working with. My name is Erica Dickstein with Spring Insight.
And I'm Laura Mayer, also with Spring Insight.
Awesome. Okay, so first, when people think about branding, probably the first thing, it's certainly not the only thing, and that's why we're talking about this today, but the first thing they're going to think about is the logo, right?
Yes.
That is
Yes, absolutely.
clearly what what you sort of have in mind. So, of course, the first asset you want to make sure that you have is a logo.
Right, right. And for that, from a technical perspective, you want certain print file types, right? So ideally, you're going to have the native file. And by that, is it an Adobe Illustrator file? Is it a Photoshop file? If you have the original native file from the designer, you'll be able to make changes more easily later. So that's really great to have.
Or hire
But that
someone
said,
or
yeah,
hire someone. If you don't know how to do it, if you have that file, you'll be able to transfer that file and
to someone who
another
does know what they're doing,
designer
sure.
will be able to do it. Absolutely.
Yeah, but from a practicality standpoint, the files that you really want for your website, you're going to want the PNG version. Those have the transparent background. You'll have a JPEG version. Those are a little bit lighter and easier to use sometimes, especially if you don't need that transparent background. And another file type that is often overlooked is if you can get the SVG file, the vector files, because for simpler logos or small icons or things like that, those are meant to scale. So they scale beautifully and they're great for responsive design.
SVG or EPS, by the way.
Or yeah, EPS too. Yeah.
EPS too. So those are the two that scale. And just to make this more complicated for those taking notes, if you can, you want to have that on in a single color on a dark background and on a white background. So picture it. You want to, somebody says, hey, you know, I'm going to link to you on my website and we can put your logo into my footer. The footer is black. And by the way, it can't be in color. So you need to have, or you're designing something, you're creating pens and you need a one color logo. So the most flexibility you have is if you get those file types in full color and then with a white background and also with a dark background so that you can sort of have that logo for a variety of different purposes.
And while you're at it, if you could, it'd be great to have both versions on a transparent background. Get everything you possibly can. The favicon, if
Absolutely.
you are going to pull out a little bit, and we talk a lot about the favicon at Spring Insight. For those that don't know, it's that little bitty 16 by 16, usually pixel icon that's up in your web browser tab window. That's equally important too. So that's great to have in
Yeah,
hand
that is
with
a
your
great
logo.
point, by the way. With the favicon, it's not just making sure that you have the icon as a deliverable, it's making sure that when you have worked with the designer on your logo, that you have kept that favicon in mind, that you've thought about, okay, I love this, and what's the element going to be that has that has the favicon? That's of course um, the little bitty icon that appears at the tab at the top of at the top of your browser.
Yeah,
Okay.
lots of people want to take that favicon and just shrink it down, or take the logo and shrink it down
Mhm.
and make it the favicon. And that is such a limited space that it can be very unreadable, unlegible, and sometimes the favicon just might be a little aspect of the logo that you take
Right.
out.
Yeah. So for instance, Spring Insight has, our name, it's the name, and then there's a little flower that is above the I, and
Hmm.
our favicon is the little flower
So clever.
that's above the I. Exactly. All right. So the next things we're going to talk about, that's the most important and the critical thing that you're always going to get, right? The logo is sort of almost by definition. The next things we're going to talk about, these are things um, that in particular, if you're using this and then you're going to create other assets that really help that design process out, to have created and received these specific assets so that the design, it's easier to continue to reflect what you're doing. So the next item is your color palette.
Yeah. Color palette. And again, from the technical project manager perspective, we don't mean just we use blue and purple and red. We need the hexadecimal values, right? We need those actual, and that's how you maintain consistency from print design to web design to if you have t-shirts, if you have business cards, all of these things rely on the actual specific value of those colors in your color palette. Typically, there's about five. You could have three, you could have seven, you could have as many as you want. But it's just important to have those. And because we always plug it at Spring Insight, you actually want to have them ran through some sort of accessibility compliance checker so that you're already familiar with the combinations that you could use those colors and if you could use those colors to maintain WCAG 2.1 compliance.
Yep, that is a great point. I'm glad you brought it up. So what that means is you're going to want to create that that color palette with an eye to that accessibility, making sure. So if you have five colors, you really want to be able to use them in combination with each other. If you have let's say you have a call out box and you want to make the call out box in the case of our colors purple, we know that we have five different colors. We are able to put, if we use our dark purple, we can put our yellow on top of it, but we can't put our light purple on top of it because that does not have
Doesn't
sufficient
meet
contrast.
compliance. Hmm.
So you get your so you get that color palette with those hopefully five. My preference is for at least five colors in those hexadecimal values, and then in addition to that, you get a document that basically shows you in how things work and whether you're able to use them with one another.
Hmm. Very
Awesome.
important.
All right, next we're going to talk about typography. So fonts and your font
Fonts.
selection. Exactly.
Yeah, that's so important. I think a lot of people, we don't realize when we recognize something with a brand necessarily. It's kind of a feeling it evokes. And so you want to be consistent when you're rebranding, when you're using any kind of communication with anyone, that your fonts are consistent. Typically you're going to have at least two fonts. One you kind of use for your headings and your bold statements, and their different heading levels: H1, H2, H3, all the way down to H6. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll do another video on that stuff later. But that's important to document. And then you'll have some kind of sort of paragraph font that you use for regular text. And again, A11Y compliant, you want a minimum of a 15-point font. 16 points coming a little more popular. It depends on what the font looks like. But it's just great to have that documented so that your designers, your content creators, anyone, your social media posters, anyone is aware of the font that represents your brand.
Yeah, no, super good point. And then to the final thing we're going to talk about, and this is really let's call this the bow that wraps everything wraps everything up, is the style guide. And what the style
Mm-hmm.
guide, it's so critical. What the style guide does is it actually just documents all of the things that we just discussed and talks and basically illustrates how they work together, right? So it documents what is, the logo, what is the logo, and what shows the different logos. It shows the typography. It shows the color palette, and it gives those hexadecimal values, and it gives any specific, in the case of the logo, we didn't really go into this, but for some logos, there might be variants of the logo where sometimes they might have a tagline and other times they don't have a tagline. And so it'll say, well, it's used in this way during these circumstances and used in this way. It sort of sets the parameters around your branding. And I know, speaking for us as an agency, when somebody comes in already with their with branding already, and they have one of these design guides, it is amazing because it doesn't take away creativity from us. It actually gives us it gives us sort of guardrails to the creativity. We know that there is some thought that we need to make sure that we work around. So it's just super, super helpful.
Yeah, sometimes style guides are even very, very extensive, where if you use a content management system or a page builder system, it might give examples of specific modules or blocks and what styling would look like in certain situations versus others, as you talked about that. And it might also include specific icon usage and when to use the light background or the dark background. So it's just very helpful documentation that helps keep everyone aligned.
Absolutely. And I
And
think
actually, just a little add on, I want to say, doing branding work, I think when Spring Insight is involved in that, that's some of our favorite work because
mm,
we're really helping these organizations find their voice and develop who they are. So it's a very just a very special process that we do with the
I love it.
clients.
I love it. It's so much. It is such an enjoyable process, and one that we really do treasure working with our clients on. So the last thing
Hmm.
I'll say on this topic is this. I feel like I'm going to sound like a teacher when I say it, but it's such an important point. Is when you get these deliverables, storing it in, like downloading it from the email, because it's one of those things, right, where somebody sends it to you and you're like, oh great, they sent it to me, and then you have it, but you don't necessarily think about like down, because you don't need it at that moment. And so I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a call from a client, right? 6 months, a year later, hey, I need this, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have, but figuring out like just like the important documents for your organization, right? Maybe your, the things that you file with the state, right? Your licenses, that those are critical and that you're not going to just put them anywhere. Your branding assets are like that. They are things that you want to have in redundant places that you want your team to have. So figuring out where you can actually store this stuff, that you're able to get, that it's safe, that nobody's deleting it, because it's a foundational item for your organization.
Hmm.
So
Great
with that,
advice.
Laura, thank you so much for coming and
Thank
joining
you.
today. And for anybody listening, thank you so much. As we said, this is work. We love doing branding. We love doing branding, whether it's on its own or whether it's part of a bigger project. So if you need logo design or help creating these brand assets, we would be so excited to work with you on that. Please come to our website, springinsight.com, SPRING, insight, INSIGHT.com. We will be happy to chat with you about the work that we do. And in the meantime, if you have gotten to this point in the video, if you're still listening, then please like this video. We that helps YouTube know that people like us and want to hear more. And we every Tuesday release a new video, so please subscribe so that you can watch the new stuff that we create.